Welcome everyone to Essentials of Automations, the art of triggers and actions in FME. So this is the second installment in our Essentials of Automation series, and we're so glad that you're all able to join us here today. I am joined by both Kezia and Bailey, so I'll hand it over to Kezia to introduce herself.
Hello everyone, I'm Kezia Yu and I am a technical support specialist for the FME Flow product, and I'll pass it on to Bailey.
Hey everyone, I'm Bailey and I do the same thing as Kezia.
Fantastic. So if you do have any questions during the webinar, please do drop those in the questions tab on the bottom right. And yeah, we'll have a Q&A portion. Get through as many as we can. So yeah, as I mentioned, questions on the bottom right. We also have the chat on the bottom right as well in Livestorm. So keep letting us know where you are tuning in from there. You can share your emoji reactions with us during the webinar. And then also, lastly, if you do have any audio or video issues, just click that help button on the bottom left for 4 simple steps to take. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask our presenters to turn off their webcams. That'll just help us save on some bandwidth here for the remainder. All right.
Awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll hand it off for the agenda here.
Awesome. So with that, thanks, Elizabeth. I'll take it from here and continue on with the agenda. So today we will be going over what are automations, understanding triggers and actions in FME Flow, and then we'll look at adapting your existing workspaces for enhanced automation. And finally, we will look into transitioning to automations from FME Flow job submitter workflows that you may have. And then we'll finish it off with some next steps, resources, and Q&A. So what are automations? So automations is a core capability of FME Flow, automating your processes and workflows to run at regular intervals in response to something happening outside FME, to run something in real time, or chaining a series of workspaces to run together. All of this can be achieved using FME Flow automations. So FME Flow automations is for the enterprise, allowing for full data, application, and system integrations. We can streamline your workflows and ensure efficient, real-time data across various systems and platforms, saving you time and resources to focus on things that really matter to you, your team, or your organization. So the importance of triggers and actions and automations. This is why we'll be going through some of the best practices when building out your automations. There are so many ways to do something on FME Flow, and the optimal way for you can help increase efficiency, accuracy, control, and scalability. You can automate your routine tasks to save time and reduce errors, ensure data integrity and consistency through controlled workflows, and you can also customize your workflows to meet your specific project requirements. Increasing your workloads without compromising performance is great for scalability. And this screenshot is just a sneak peek to our new iconography coming in the 2024.1 release, with a cleaner and more cohesive look and feel between all the products within the FME platform. And as we go through the slides, you'll see the new icons that may look a little bit different, but in our demos, we will still be using 2024.0. Just a heads up there. So some common challenges with triggers and actions and automations include resources where we have lack of time or manpower to explore and implement features, maybe some knowledge gaps with insufficient training or expertise in maximizing the potential of FME for your specific use cases, and also suboptimal workflows where existing processes are not fully optimized, leading to inefficiencies and potential data issues. So as we release new features, it's good practice to review and maintain your workflows to continually improve your efficiency. So to resolve this, we can take a deeper dive into the art of actions and triggers, lowering the barrier to entry with our free training and also the automation webinars like today that we're doing. So today's webinar is part of a series for automations essentials. The first one was optimizing FME workflow with parameters. Today we will be going through the art of triggers and actions. Here's just an overview of the FME integration platform. We have the FME form product, which allows you to integrate your data workflows, and then FME flow to automate those workflows. And then we also have FME flow hosted, which is FME flow, but hosted on AWS cloud environment and managed by us here at Safe Software. And with that, I'll pass it on to Bailey to dig a little bit deeper into this next section.
Thanks, Kezia.
No problem.
Let's dive into triggers and actions in FME Flow. So triggers kick off our automations by listening for and receiving messages from external clients or within FME Flow. We connect actions to triggers, which run jobs and then process our data. Triggers allow the power and flexibility to define when those jobs run, either on a schedule or in response to an event, and this saves organizations valuable time. And so here are triggers that are currently supported in FME automations. We've got triggers that are able to watch for files being uploaded to a location like FTP or S3 buckets, automated schedules, webhooks, emails received, HTTP requests, and more. Right now, we're going to cover a few of the most common triggers used in automations. Schedules are set up to trigger the automation to complete tasks at specific times in the future. These are most useful for automating data processing or syncing data between systems, or for periodically generating summary reports of your data. Our directory watch trigger monitors activity on an FME Flow resources folder or another file location, and it sends a JSON message about the activity, including when files are added, changed, or deleted. These are great for automatic data updates from watched folders, and we'll also see this trigger in action in a demo in a little bit. The webhook trigger receives JSON and other data as an HTTP put, post, or delete request message. And we've seen webhooks used to streamline data updates from survey response submissions, as well as to trigger alerts from IoT sensor responses. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out our webinar on real-time events in automations to learn more. In automations, internal actions are most commonly used right after the triggers. And these serve to process messages and transform data either in an FME workspace or through other tools. Running a workspace that you've authored in FME form is our most used internal action. And this is the connection point on how you take your data workflows to the next level with our FME Flow automations. And we also have other actions such as a merge, filter, log a message, and the ability to run a dynamic workspace for our internal actions. Usually at the end of your automation, you have an external action, and these send messages to external clients or send messages inside FME Flow to trigger other workflows. Most of our external actions fall into these two categories. Notifications send out messages with information from previous actions in the automation, such as the data processed or like the job completion status. Some even allow attachments like our email action does. The file upload sends out files to external applications in response to the messages from the previous actions. And this process is customizable, and you can define the file path and name to be uploaded. These are our external actions in FME Flow automations. Lots of these are similar to our triggers. And currently, these include S3 buckets and FTP, Dropbox to upload files, as well as sending out messages with email or HTTP requests, or even alerting a topic within FME Flow. So let's look at a couple of applications of external actions. To start off, the Amazon S3 bucket action receives messages and uploads objects to an S3 bucket. This allows our customers to better support clients by delivering data and analytics insights to their preferred cloud storage locations. The email external action delivers emails and uses the SMTP protocol. This is useful in an automatic QA process where if files don't follow project standards, the data upload stops and an email notification is sent to inform about the issue and then stop that incorrect data from being uploaded. Another application is a data collection process where a citizen submits a form online, the data is processed, and a summary email with all the relevant files is automatically sent out. Okay, now we're going to jump into a demo with a directory watch and email notification. So the goal here is to automatically extract and process data, but that's usually blocked by the manual effort required to extract specific information and send the email. So the key to achieving this is to leverage the resource or network directory watch trigger and the email external action in an FME Flow automation. Doing this will result in the data being automatically processed and an email sent out. Okay, now let's jump into the demo. So this is our automations canvas, and it always starts off with a trigger action on the canvas. Adding subsequent internal and external actions is super easy with our click and drop interface, and then we just connect the ports the same way between them. So today we're going to configure a resource or network directory watch trigger. Here's all the triggers we can select from as well. And now I'm going to pick the directory to watch, and I'm going to look for an invoice update where an invoice is uploaded to this folder. And I only want to watch for create, not modify and delete. We validate it and apply that trigger. Now I'm going to jump over to an automation I've already set up for the other actions. And so as you can see here, with the internal action, I've set up to run a workspace. I've selected my workspace, and I've also included these parameters. You can check out our next webinar coming up in this series to learn more about those parameters. And here's all of our other external actions, but we're going to stick with the email send. I've already included our SMTP information that I need there, added the email I want to send from, and now I'm just going to configure the email subject to use some of those parameters that flow through the automation. So I'm going to put job status, which will say success or failure based on how that workspace completed. And then I'm also going to pull in the invoice name to be sent through in the email subject. So this will look something like success invoice and the name processed. I've also configured the email body already with some of these parameters. So I validate this and apply it. And now let's start the automation. So now I'm going to go find that resource location that I've set the trigger to watch. I'm going to upload my invoice, and I'm just going to drag and drop it here. Super easy. And now we see I've uploaded that one invoice, so our automation should have triggered off, and it'll flow through here, run the workspace. After that completes successfully, we're going to send out the email. And now let's have a look at the email. And as you can see, we've got success, and that invoice has been processed, as well as other information coming through in the email subject. Great. So now let's look at some key takeaways from that demo. Taking workflows to the next level is easy with our automations click and drop interface. Our automations offer a wide variety of triggers and actions to suit most needs. And even these simple automations with just one trigger, one internal and one external action save organizations valuable time and effort. And now I'm going to pass it back to Kezia.
Awesome, thank you. And in this section, let's build on top of Bailey's initial workflow that she showcased and update your existing workflows using the automations writer. It is a way for us to optimize our workflows and build out our automations. So adapting existing workspaces with the automation writer would look something like this. I'll definitely get into the workspace as we go through the demo, but in this screenshot, this is the workspace that Bailey was using in her automation action, and she's writing out to that SQL Server table. And I want to grab that information that she's writing out and use it in my downstream processing in that automation. So from that feature merger transformer, I'm going to use the attribute keeper, take those attributes that I'm interested in, and feed it into the automations writer so I can use it later on. And then we can also make use of user parameters and linking attributes to workspaces. So ultimately, automations writers allow for data to be taken out of the workspace and processed downstream for the next action or external action in automations. So a little bit about messages and data that are passed between automation and components. You saw Bailey do a little bit of this earlier with using the drop-down arrow for parameters. You can link those attributes or add them to the email body or other parameters as well. So these attributes are key value pairs that hold information about an event or a user-defined value. These parameters can intake attributes, allowing for actions to be run with upstream values. So automation attributes are often JSON-based, so you'll see that formatting there. And a little bit more about this is that jobs can be split into smaller batches to be processed, which will improve efficiency. And just like how features are passed between Workbench components, messages can be passed between automation components. And here are parameters and attributes that are available for each trigger and action. So as you can see in the first screenshot here, that's in FME Workbench, and in the user parameter, we have 2 user parameters there. And once we publish that workspace to FME Flow and get that workspace in automations, those 2 user parameters are visible in the parameters panel. And I'll showcase that a little bit more in the demo later on. So user parameters created in FME Workbench become parameters inside the run workspace action. And then you can start drawing connections between ports to use incoming attributes inside an action's parameters. So if you would like to learn more about this, we do have a link to the Essentials of Automations Exploring Attributes and Automations Parameter webinar from the first webinar part of this series, and it's definitely available for recording as well. So routing data between workspaces with attributes and automation writer, we can achieve implementing enterprise integration patterns, sending data from within a workspace to other automation actions, and then building workspaces to run data-driven processing in parallel, and then also merging data from other systems. With that, we're going to probably jump into the next demo, but before so, high-level overview of what we'll be looking at. The goal is to enrich that data that is sent to other systems in the middle of an automation. So data is stuck inside that FME workspace, and we can get that out using that FME Flow Automations writer, which enables data to be passed both into and out of the workspaces that are in the automations. So this results in attribute values being available for downstream workflow components and enables data to be passed both into and out of that workspace. And you can build out maybe the email body or other workspaces that way. So I'm just going to jump into my demo and share my screen very shortly. Start off with that bench. Okay. So I should be sharing my screen now. Here is FME Workbench, which was the screenshot you saw earlier in that slide there. Again, we're taking some attributes from that feature merger that is writing to that SQL Server table here. And we're also going to select which attributes we're interested in keeping in. So I like to keep the customer ID, invoice number, and invoice total to be used in my email body later on. So I'll click OK. And then I'm using this automation writer, which is a writer specifically made for automations, and I'll get those attributes out. So once I publish this workspace to FME Flow, then I can add it to my automation canvas. So this is a similar automation that Bailey showcased, but I just changed the workspace action here to my version. And as you can see, instead of just the success and failed port, now I have one more port, which is the automations writer port, and taking that data out of this port to feed into the next action. So this trigger is still reading from the same directory that Bailey was pointing to earlier. And then from this workbench or this workspace action, we're just reading in that incoming file and still connecting and writing to that SQL Server. But we're also using that automation writer port to feed into my email action here. And I'm going to build out my email body a little bit differently. So I'm going to use the drop-down arrow and go to text editor. And as you can see, we have here the workspace attributes, and this is the automations invoice attributes that we pulled out from that workspace. And as you can see, we have the invoice total, customer ID, and invoice number that I'm looking to use. So in the email body, I'm just including that customer ID, and you can simply click and it'll show up with that attribute, for example, customer ID. There you go, and it'll automatically link that data through. And same with the invoice number and invoice total. So I'm just gonna keep it as is, invoice for customer ID for a total of the total, and then has been updated, invoice reference number as well. And then kind regards, we'll end it there and click apply. So then I'll save it and click start debug. And if I were to go back to that directory and upload a data, so invoice update, you can also upload the data from this upload button as well. And I'll select this file. And then we're going to go back to that automation. As you can see, it's being processed. And let me just double check my email to see if it's come in yet. And it's right here. So you see now those attributes are filled with actual values from that workspace. So the customer ID is 564. The total is right here. And then also the ID is 2034 for that invoice reference number. So yeah, that's just a little bit about automations writer and how you can take data and have it processed further on in your automation. Let me jump back into my slides here and go through some key takeaways from what I just demoed. So automation attributes can pass messages and data between automation components, and automation writers can be used to create output ports to the workspace action nodes and bring data out for further downstream processing. So you can have as many automations writer as you need and create ports that way. So if you have one automation writer, you're going to see an extra port in that workspace action. If you have two, then you'll see two extra ports there on top of the success and failed port in the automation. Right. And with that, we'll transition into the next section, which is transitioning to automations from FME Flow job submitter workflows. All right, so as I mentioned before, I do encourage and recommend using FME Flow automations instead of the FME Flow job submitter. There are pros and cons to both, but there are often multiple ways to achieve the same outcome even with an FME Flow. So some pros and cons: automations can do what FME Flow job submitter does, but more efficiently, and transitioning from FME Flow job submitter to a more dynamic setup will be great so that you can easily share your automations and have a visual view of it, so that when you're passing it on to the next champion, it's easier to understand and they can pick it up and hit the ground running with it. So keeping it visual on the web UI, instead of having to download the workspace and view what is set up for that transformer, the FME Flow job submitter, will save you a lot of time. It's easy to understand what's happening in that workflow that maybe another user or author have configured in automations. And then also automations allow for us to create, scale, and troubleshoot complex workflows, whereas some drawbacks of FME Flow job submitter is that it's a little bit more complex to configure and having to deal with authentication and maybe more documentation on your end when sharing those workspaces, which may cost more time and need to maintain and calls for more troubleshooting later on. So having more moving pieces that are broken up is in this way is not as easy, and having one place to visually see how your automations and workspaces are chained and linked together will be great just moving forward and sharing those automations with your team members. So yeah, we will go into the next demo here, probably the last one for today, and we're looking at enhancing our workflows with automations. The goal is to split out actions in automations, so having more workspaces in your automation to build out, and updating your current workflow. So updating maybe your current workflows for those that are using FME Flow job submitters. It can be tedious in the beginning, but it'll be better for scaling and maintenance in the long run. And in the future, with going with automations job chaining, it'll be easier to, once again, share with your team and maintain and build out that way. So ultimately, it'll result in a workflow that's easy to build, maintain, and scale. I'm just going to jump and share my screen again. All right, so this is a third iteration of that same automation that we started off in the beginning of today's webinar, but now I have two more workspaces that I've added on top here: the file mover that is going to run in parallel with the invoice extraction workspace that we originally updated. And then from there, we're going to chain another workspace to run a Slack notification message to update the Slack channels that we're looking for. So the first workspace, we're going to take that incoming file that's been updated in our directory and copy and move it to the next directory, maybe to another Teams folder, and have that automated. And then once that's moved, then we can send out a Slack notification notifying the team of what file has been moved to their directory if they need. I can open up my workspaces really quickly just to showcase what that looks like. They're fairly simple. So this first one is moving a file, and it's using the directory and file reader to read in that file that's coming into the directory. We're just managing some of those attributes and cleaning them up. And then we're using this feature writer transformer that lets us write to any format that we're looking for, but also allows for further processing with an output port. So we're using the file copy, and we're going to copy that file out to another directory. And let me see, for the data set, yep, we're taking that data set, and then we're going to write it out. And we also have an automations writer here just to grab some of that attribute from that file to be used later on. And then in the third workspace, it's just a small, quick and easy transformer, we're starting off with the creator to kick off that workspace, and then using a Slack connector transformer to connect to our Slack and select the channel that we're interested in. We have two options. We can send a message or file upload. And then for that message that we're looking for, I'm going to use a user parameter so that we can change this message and customize it in the automation when we're there. So once we publish both these workspaces to FME Flow, then we can link them up here, as I've done so here. And from that success port, we're linking that file mover, and it'll move that file accordingly. And from this automations writer output port, we're going to send out that Slack notification. So in this first workspace with the file mover, we're reading in that file from the directory, and then also we're going to write to a different directory here. So I've selected a folder that I've created for it. And then once that's set, then I will send out a Slack notification. Let me open the text editor, and you can build out this message. I wanted to include maybe the file name that's been moved to this directory, and also what automation is this message coming from. And these are just grabbed from these attributes in the side panel here. Apply. And splitting out these workspaces is great because you can use them and reuse them across your automation or across multiple automations. So if I wanted to send out different Slack notifications depending on the success or failed port, then we can definitely reuse and build it out this way. Slack message, and instead of having this message, we can configure it to say it's successful. There's a successful move to this file, for this file to this directory. Or you can also send it to the output port here. Lead from the failed output port, then we can use that Slack notification again and say the file moved did not succeed, and someone can go and look into it and send that Slack notification. And we also have some error attributes as well that we can include. All right, so I won't use that for now. So we'll continue, we'll click Start Debug, and then I'll go back to that resource and showcase what that looks like with that Slack message and file being moved. I'll first have to delete that message, that initial invoice, then I'll update it again. Let's remove this. Let's make sure the folder that I'm looking to move that file in is up to date. That's looking good. So now that my automation started, I'm going to add a new file up here. And then once that's triggered, it'll kick off that automation and proceed to move that file, but also send out that email and send out that Slack notification. Let's refresh. That file is going through this automation. Let's go back to resources, data, to that second directory that I'm looking to have that file in. So I can showcase what that looks like in the Slack message and the email there. So let me open my Slack, and as you can see, this is the channel I'm writing to. As you can see, this is the message that we'll see. So the invoice moved to the FME Flow directory, the directory that is selected, and then the file name is here, and the automation name that I've selected is here as well. And then from the email, it'll be the same email that we've seen earlier, and it'll showcase customer ID, that total, and that invoice reference number as well. So if I had more maybe logging in my automation from the failed ports, then I would be able to get those notifications as well and build out a more comprehensive automation that way. Yeah. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and jump back into my slides again and go through some key takeaways from what we just saw. So splitting jobs and passing data between actions using Automations Writer, this can be helpful to avoid situations where a single feature causes an entire job to fail, forcing you to redo a long-running job. Additionally, splitting up jobs, it can help sometimes be more efficient to distribute work across multiple FME flow engines, especially if you're running hundreds or thousands of tasks. And finally, it's also great for reusing workspaces across the automation or multiple automations, as I've mentioned before, such as with the Slack notification workspace. Looking ahead, there are a number of FME flow transformers that are planned for deprecation in 2024.1 release. So this would include the FME flow resource connector, FME flow log file retriever, and FME flow job waiter. They will be deprecated in 2024.1. However, if you are currently using these in your current workspace and do use them in your workflows, they will still work and continue to work for the foreseeable future. Workspaces with deprecated transformers will contain a log warning when run and informing these users that they are deprecated. But you essentially in 2024.1, you just won't be able to author new workflows using these transformers. Some alternatives to these FME flow transformers would be to use the FME flow REST API version 4, and also to build out your workflows using FME flow automations. And with that, I'll conclude with this statement: we can achieve efficient, scalable, automated workflows with FME flow in general. So with that, I'll pass it back to Elizabeth to share some final resources, next steps before we get into Q&A.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you, Kezia. So some resources. Today we have a couple specifically on this topic to help you get started. Yeah, I believe 2 different support articles there. So I can drop the link to both of those in the chat actually while I'm here. Here's the first one and the second, just for easier accessibility for you all. And then also, if you have yet to get our ebook on spatial data for the enterprise, we have a short link for that. And then also a ton of free resources. So our FME Academy knowledge base and webinars are all great places to check out guided learning at your fingertips. And then also with our webinar program, we have a lot of upcoming content, and then also a lot of on-demand webinars that you can search through depending on what you might be looking for support with. We also have recently started producing podcasts with EM360. So feel free to check those out if you have yet to do so. I've just got a couple on display here that were more recently popular. I'll drop that link in the chat as well. And then next steps here. So if you wish to contact us about anything data, please get in touch, info@safe.com. And our FME Accelerator course, it's a great place to get started if you're learning the basics with FME. It's 90 minutes and free of charge. And then lastly here, as a thank you for joining us today, we have a community badge code. And I've just linked that in the chat as well. So just visit the community page and scroll down a little bit, and you can plug that in to redeem on the right side if you're a member of the community. And if you have yet to check out the community, we encourage you to do so. It's a great place to ask questions, network with other users, and get answers to any challenges you might be facing.
And with that, I will have one of our presenters join me on stage, and we can start on some Q&A. I do believe we had some questions come in throughout the webinar. If there were any you wanted to highlight, Bailey, and maybe talk more in detail about, or if you saw any new questions come in as well, we can take a look at those.
Yeah, probably the first one I'll highlight is, how does FME handle the race of 2 flow actions running continuously or simultaneously, at the same time? And that depends on the number of available engines on the FME flow. So if in our example, we had 2 workspace actions running at the same time in that automation, if we had 2 engines available, each one will go on an engine and they'll run at the same time. If there was only 1 engine available, the first workspace will run, and then once it completes, the second workspace will run. So yeah.
Perfect. I think the person who asked the question as well has a follow-up question in the chat.
Like about webhooks to upload documents to a web page that'll trigger workspace. That one in the chat. So FME flow automations can connect to webhooks to be triggered through that, but you could also probably use an API or a webhook that'll then trigger FME flow after that document's been uploaded. It ultimately would depend on the web page source and what webhooks and APIs are available there. We did have a couple questions on triggers, one for Google Cloud Platform buckets and one for databases. We don't have those triggers yet. I did post that it'd be a great idea to post on the FME community, and we could look at implementing those. But basically, for those workflows that we don't have a designated trigger for, we'd recommend just using a schedule to pull. Essentially, you would run a workspace and pull the database for changes, and then continue on and run another workspace if there has been changes, or stop the automation there if there hasn't been changes. That'd be the best way to do that.
Awesome. I don't think I see any new questions coming in either. Let me just take another look through the questions tab as well. Okay, awesome. Yeah, if we got everyone's questions as well, and we are nearing the end of the hour as well, I think we've answered all of the questions that came in. So I just wanted to thank everyone for their attendance today. If you do have a moment as well to fill out our webinar survey, that would be awesome. We appreciate any feedback. I also just wanted to thank Bailey for joining me today for Q&A, and also a big thank you to our presenter team as well for all their help with content creation. I will just leave the webinar running for a few more minutes. So if anyone wants to save out any of the links I chatted out throughout the webinar, you can do that. But yeah, other than that, thank you so much for attending, everyone. Have a great day.